Hi, you guys. Filming here again from my front porch. As you can see, got my mobile camera. I'm gonna point that down on a piece of paper here in just a second. Before we get into any material, even before we get into review, I need to spend a few minutes just on expectations coming into Calculus 2. Okay, and you, I guess you could say these are my expectations. They're really just they're usually unspoken expectations when you move to a higher caliber level class like we are doing. So let me explain. So I've got kind of shifting this, putting the camera on my little stand here. I've got a piece of paper here, and I'm typically this is how you're going to see lecture. By the way, just a page with some writing on it and me speaking over it. Okay, so what do I got here? Calculus 2 expectations. I've got a couple of analogies and a few things to say here. Um, when you come into Calculus 2, you come into a higher caliber level in your mathematical academics, okay, in your math classes, right? Um, you might notice something similar happen now that you've completed Calc 1, when you start going into, physics courses that need calculus, or even chemistry, economics, things that require calculus. Once you get through Calc 1, everything is now at this higher caliber, and our class most certainly holds true for that as well. So what have I got here? So imagine this, it's like a funnel, or it's like a tube or a tunnel. Okay, so way back years ago, when you took algebra, and then, a few years later, so maybe that was like middle school, early high school, then you would have taken geometry, trig, pre-calc, calc 1, and then here we are. So what am I trying to depict here? This is almost like margin for error. Okay, so to pass an algebra class, we have this very wide margin of error. And it doesn't feel like a wide margin of error at the time, because it would have gotten narrow from the previous one, like maybe arithmetic or something. But every time we progress, obviously mathematics builds up on what you had learned before. But up until pre-calc, it was this, more or less gradual kind of, narrowing. And so you always had to know the things from the previous courses, more or less. And obviously, the level of difficulty in the problems got harder, and the amount of time that you would need to spend got more and more and more. And so it took a lot more just discipline to get through these things. A lot more mistakes were happening, and questions getting answered, and difficulties were arising, and things you had to overcome. Okay, but it felt like maybe more or less gradual through all of these years up until pre-calc. Okay, then you took Calc 1, and let's see if I can get my camera to focus just slightly better. Perfect. Then when you took Calc 1, part of the big shock of Calc 1 is how drastically the margin of error narrows. Okay, so when you come into Calc 1, maybe you're kind of like right here, and you kind of expect it to sort of narrow in the same way. And if nobody told you any different, that would be perfectly reasonable. But the truth is, when you take Calc 1, the margin of error shrinks dramatically. And it's incredibly shocking, and a lot of students have to take Calc 1 more than once when maybe they were doing just fine previous to that. That's my story for sure. I actually took Calc 1 3 times before I was able to come out the other end and really knew what I was doing with Calc 1. And maybe that's true for a lot of you guys as well. Maybe you had to take Calc 1 more than once. Totally normal because of how drastic that shift is. Okay, but now here we are. When we come out of Calc 1 and we enter into Calc 2, now we have this dramatically smaller margin of error. And that's why I say it's a higher caliber course. So what does that mean? What will that act? What's the experience of being in a higher caliber level course? Okay, so kind of to put it simply, and I'll go into details. To put it simply, it means less will be given and more will be expected. Okay, now that doesn't mean that I'm like holding back. I'm not, it's not, I just choose to give you less and expect more, and that's just my own teaching philosophy. Not at all. I'm going to give you guys all I can, all that is healthy for me, because you need to be challenged, and I want you to overcome these challenges, okay? And actually understand the concepts in the process. Okay, so part of what it means to live in this, this smaller, margin of error. A big part of it is how much time you're going to spend working on problems, right? So, and homework and things like that. So, in Calc 1, I think a lot of us definitely experience that. You could spend an hour on a Calc 1 problem and not have the answer by the end, right? So, some of those, like, related rates, optimization, taking difficult derivatives, even some of the limit questions at the beginning of Calc 1, you could spend a lot of time on that and not really know if what you're doing is right. And that's perfectly normal. Okay, so that's going to be our entire class. In Calc 2, expect to spend a lot of time. So there's this general rule about in a college level course, right? They say, I always heard, for every 1 hour of lecture, expect to spend 2 hours on your own. Okay. And I've also heard people say for every 1 hour lecture, spend 3 hours on your own. Okay, so just forget that rule completely. That's not going to apply to this class. For every 1 hour lecture, spend 2 hours on your own. Just forget it. This is a 4-unit class. So you would think, okay, 4 units. So if we were meeting on campus, that'd be 4 hours a week. So you could expect to spend 8 hours on your own studying. Okay, that's just totally unrealistic. You're, I, a typical week is not going to be only 8 hours. It's going to be many more than that. And don't even bother counting the hours, right? There's no reason to do that either. And that may have been your experience in Calc 1, like just how much time these things took. And that's going to be normal. It doesn't mean that you're not doing well in the class. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do well on tests. That's just the nature of the concepts and just how difficult they are. Okay, another thing, how is this narrowing? What's the experience going to be like? In the lecture that I present, there is simply no way, it's just not possible to present every type of problem. We can't do that. And actually, we shouldn't do that. But let me just speak for a moment of why we can't do that. Because there are way too many nuances to these concepts. And problems that you may see in the homework, it's just impossible to present every type. Like, I mean, the lectures would be, instead of maybe an hour long for a section, it'd be 3 or 4 hours per section, right? I mean, we just can't do that. And here's why we shouldn't do that. Because we're at a higher caliber, we want to see growth in your understanding of how to tackle these sort of difficulties, right? So I'm going to present all the concepts thoroughly. You will see all of the concepts you need thoroughly explained and presented. But there's got to be an internalization of those concepts on the student's end. And part of how that internalization, how that learning and that growth occurs is to challenge you with problem types that you didn't see in an example, in the same style. And here's what, even else on another level, even problems done that are to be done in the same style are going to be very challenging. It's just the nature of the concepts. Hey, this one's the same style, but the details are going to vary a lot, right? And so you have to have that deeper level of understanding to be able to execute the same type of problem, with different specifics, in each case, right? Okay. Here's how the experience will change. Another way it will change. Everybody, all you guys, you got to be more resourceful and more diligent than ever before. Okay. What do I mean by more resourceful and more diligent? Don't try to do this completely on your own. Forget it. That's not the way learning occurs after a certain point. Maybe you got through these courses more or less on your own. Like, obviously, your teacher explained things, and you might have had to go, to get some help once in a while. Some of you, But maybe you could say, you know what, I was pretty much learning it kind of, I was fine. Like once I saw the lecture and stuff, I was good. Okay. That's not going to be the case anymore at this higher caliber. You got to work with other students. You got to go check out some tutoring. You got to come to office hours. Not necessarily all of these things, but some of them. I put some links to Khan Academy. Maybe that's helpful for you. Maybe you click with that. Maybe you don't. There's not one resource, right? Try and get a breadth of resources. Working with other students, uh, you know, coming to me in office hours is good. And, we've got some live tutoring and that sort of thing. And obviously, we all have the internet and there's some really wonderful things out there if you look for it, and what can speak to you. Um, so be more resourceful and more diligent. Here's why you got to be more diligent, because you're going to get stuck a lot. You're going to get stuck on problems, and you got to just going to be staring at the same thing when you're in this narrow passage, and without talking it out with somebody else, it's just going to be banging your head against the wall a lot of times. Okay, and that brings me to another thing. It might seem like, oh my gosh, there's less margin for error. So that means I can't make mistakes. It's actually the exact opposite. You will make a lot of mistakes in this class, and you should you should never try to make mistakes, but when you do, you should. That means you're learning. That means you're trying to break down these difficult concepts, and you're wrestling with them. You're struggling with them. That is a good and healthy thing, and you are growing when you do that actively. Okay, but as you're wrestling and struggling with these concepts, you got to find ways to overcome those things. And that's where the resourcefulness and the diligence comes in. But don't think for a second that I mean a narrow margin of error means less mistakes. It's the opposite. You're going to make more mistakes, and you should be making more mistakes, not intentionally, but you should be making more mistakes than ever, because it's super hard to stay in this narrow, right? You're going to try to stray out, and you're going to bang that, the side, and you're like, oh, what did I do? And I went off somewhere and I got this thing. I thought I had it, and I was so far off. That is normal, and it means you're wrestling with the concepts. But so don't take it as discouragement when you make mistakes. Take it as a learning opportunity, and fixing those mistakes and internalizing that and moving on. Okay. One other thing I just wanted, before I pull this paper down, we move on a little bit. What else? So, I said office hours is a fantastic resource, and it is. But just the nature of office hours, it's sorry, some street racing going on on my street right now. Um, so when you come to office hours, just because now you're speaking with me, and I can just kind of walk through the answers to anything. um, Before you come to me, please come to my office hours. Every single meeting, even, would be fantastic. But before you come, you got to put in your due diligence with the work. Okay, so kind of like a telltale sign for an instructor at this level is when a student comes in and they say, I didn't understand number six. I just don't understand number six. And that's all they say. Like, okay, but so that shows that did you really try and be resourceful and diligent with that, and it's okay to come in and say, I have no idea what to do with number six. But if you haven't really tried to push through that barrier in some, and maybe multiple ways, some way or multiple ways, I talked to tutors, I tried to get in touch with other people in the class, and I did this and this, and I still have no idea what to do. Okay, that's what we want. Or even better, come in and say, hey, number six, I tried this and I tried that, and I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. That's what we want to see. There's got to be this self-motivation, even stronger than you had before. Okay, and then we'll talk it out together, right? Okay. I've got another analogy. So we've got like this, this tube or this thing. I kind of think of it like a gate. Calc 1 is like a narrow gate. And a lot of students attempt to get through that narrow gate, but very few, try to get through the gate, or many try to get through the gate, but very few actually enter and get into Calc 2. Okay, but I know all of you guys made it in. So here's where we are, and this is just the reality. Okay, here's kind of another way to think of it, all right? So imagine it's not a tube this time with margin of error. It's like climbing a mountain, all right? So what's going on here? So we got algebra, geometry, trig, pre-calc, and then you reach Calc 1. So, okay, so you're going through these levels, and they're getting harder, and you're climbing. And maybe it's even, I've kind of shown the same steepness all the way, but maybe it is getting a little bit steeper even as you go. But you're climbing this mountain, and you're learning math, and you get to Calc 1, and Calc 1 is like this sheer cliff. Like, what do we do? And it, like, a lot of students, they walk right up to that cliff, and they never make it, even 1 foot up the cliff the first time they take it. That was my story. First time I took Calc 1, let me tell you, I was getting test scores percentages in the teens, 15%, right? Maybe like a good score was like 26% on a test. Seriously, the first time I took Calc 1, I had no idea. So so we make it up to here, and Calc 1 is like, okay, we need like a whole other way to get up, something different than we did before, right? And there were a lot of obstacles to try and shoot up this sheer cliff. We had to learn how to climb that. And now at the end, we find ourselves up at this whole new elevation. Right now we're standing up atop, and this is Calc 2 and Calc 3 and things like that are going to continue up here. So again, we're at this whole new caliber of a course, and there's just expectations up there. You can't make the sort of like algebraic mistakes. If you're making mistakes, algebraic mistakes here in Calc 1, you're gonna slip off that cliff really fast. And so those things need to be, all of these things need to be solid, rock solid, as we get into Calc 2. If you're going to stay atop this cliff and not slip back down. All right, so what does that mean? What is the experience going to be like? Well, we got some of this in Calc 1, but now it's even more so. In Calc 1, we expect you to know all of these, anything that might come up from any one of these at any moment, right? There could be a geometry situation that comes up in a Calc 1 problem, and forget doing any calculus until you get your head around the geometry, or right, to like set up an equation or something. Okay, and then take a derivative, right? Or maybe there's some trig going on, and you need to remember a certain trig identity before you can do anything. We didn't see that a ton in Calc 1. We're going to see quite a few trig identities are going to come into play in Calc 2. Okay, so in Calc 2, all of this now we include Calc 1, right? Anything from Calc 1 or pre-calc or trig or geometry or algebra can come up at any moment. And you're going to be expected to be able to just do that perfectly. Are you going to do it perfectly? Not necessarily, right? Mistakes happen, but you got to push through that, and it's going to be expected, that you can do it. Now, there's a lot to be said about like review and things like that, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so in Calc 2, anything from any of these come up at any time. Just be prepared for that. Doesn't mean you're expected to know it immediately when it comes up. Just don't be surprised when it does. So any derivative at any time, executed, right? In Calc, the end of Calc 1, we ended with integrals. Integrals, the fundamental theorem of calculus, antiderivatives, right? U substitution. Okay, that's how we begin Calc 2. We're going to do more integrals and U substitutions as we learn new techniques. And that's just going to be a given, that you know how to do antiderivatives, you know how to do U substitutions with trig, with this and that, right? That's just going to be embedded in a bigger problem. Okay. Last thing. This is how we're going to conclude. I just wrote a few words here. This is my summary of my Calc 2 expectations. Be prepared to put in a lot of time. Be prepared to get stuck a lot, often. Get stuck often, and be prepared to make many, many mistakes. Don't be surprised when it takes you a long time to do homework, when you're getting stuck constantly. Maybe every problem, maybe every other problem, I don't know. And don't be surprised when you make a lot of mistakes. Actually, those things are a sign that you're doing something right, not wrong, that you're doing something right. But you got to push through that. So, what do I say here? Successful students will find a way to push. And that is the word push, that there is stress, right? When you try to push through something. And that is a good thing if you take it in a healthy way, right? So successful students will find a way to push through these challenges so that by the time you get to taking your test or your quiz or the final, then you are ready. You've seen all that you have to see. You've made it through the homework, the projects, the quizzes, and you're setting yourself up to do well on that test or whatever, or the quiz or whatever it is. Okay. Just last thoughts. I'll put the camera back on me. You guys have been just kind of staring at my paper for too long. I want you guys to be in the best position possible entering Calc 2, right? So there's these expectations, but then there's reality. So today, all that you're going to do for the first day is watch this video and do my review. So I've got a Calc 1 review. It's going to go all the way back to limits. Then you're going to look at derivatives, derivative rules. You're going to look at antiderivatives. You're going to be doing that sort of thing. Use substitutions because those are big coming into Calc 2. You're going to do that. Also, for a lot of you, I know you need your those more fundamental things fortified. So even all the way back to algebra, geometry, trig, pre-calc. So I've got a review on all of those things to post as well. Please, I would say everybody, my recommendation is everybody do all the review. And I'm posting answer keys. These reviews are actually not due. They're not worth any points. They're just for you guys. So I'm posting the review and I'm posting the answer keys at the same time. Please use the answer keys responsibly. Don't look at them for the answers. Obviously come back, right? And that's part of being at another higher caliber is that sort of discipline and things. So this is a good time to practice it. Okay. We also have our first office hours on Monday. So depending on when you watch this video, if you watch it before then, not sure what we're really going to do in those office hours. Say hi, that'll be nice. But then on the second day of class, or the second meeting on Wednesday, you're going to come with questions from the review. Okay. And your quiz that day, on the first Wednesday, you got your first quiz already. We're coming in strong. Your first quiz is going to be on all those review topics as well. So good luck with that. Really, really excited for the course. Hope you guys are like, my goal with this is like pump you up. Like, let's go. Like, let's tackle these challenges and just dive into it and full commitment. Just everything you got into this course, and you will really put yourself in a good position to be successful. Okay, that's all I got to say. Bye.